From KPFK in Los Angeles, California, Valley Free Radio in Florence, Massachusetts, WNUC in Detroit, and biketalk.org worldwide, this is Bike Talk.
Bike Talk.
Welcome to Bike Talk. I'm Taylor Nichols.
And I'm Nick Richard.
Hey, Nick.
Hey.
You know, the holidays are upon us once again, and the end of the year is approaching. And I think this is a good time for us to restate what our mission is here at Bike Talk.
Okay.
And in my mind, and maybe yours too, that is to prioritize the idea that the humble bicycle is a tool. It's a tool of transportation, certainly, but it's also a tool of health and a tool of fun. I mean, what's that quote by JFK? Nothing compares to the simple pleasure of riding a bike. You know, we all know that the reason many of us, or certainly most of us, don't ride more for local transportation is because they don't feel safe or comfortable doing so. Right. And that's why we on the show cover so many stories about bike lanes and infrastructure and the politics of such. Yeah. You know, the author and advocate, I don't think we've ever had him on the show, J. Harry Ray, has a great quote that says, "What is striking about biking is not that it solves any particular problem, but instead that it is part of the solution to several."
Well, we had that quote at least twice.
Well, it's a great quote, and I think it's so true. Yeah. Lately, we've been covering a lot of stories about bike touring, you know, long distance tours, short distance tours, guided tours, and DIY tours. And today we have an interview with a guy who rode his bike around Japan. The bike is such a wonderful tool to explore foreign cities and countries, but it's also a great tool to explore your own city and town. The bicycle travels at the speed of observation. And I think that's also true.
And that's been a quote that we've had a few times.
Yeah. And I'm taking credit for that one.
You said that?
I think so. I mean, yes, I did say it. I don't know if I'm the first to say it, but I just totally believe it. So,
yeah, it's totally true.
You know, we've been getting together a lot of panels of experts to discuss how cities are moving in the opposite direction of our federal government. And these cities and mayors, they might be the last line of defense to protect vulnerable road users. Today, we have a panel discussing e-bikes and how we can't let the small percentage of e-motos, illegal e-motos, spoil what is and what can be a real game changer for local transportation, allowing more people to go further without having to start a car.
Yeah, it's a great discussion.
So I would ask you to take a moment and review our show on Apple Podcast or Spotify or any of the other platforms that you listen to Bike Talk on. You know, there is one bad review, Nick. I don't know what it's on. Is it on Spotify?
It's Apple Podcasts. Yeah. We have to outbalance it with good reviews.
With some decent reviews.
Yeah.
It is an old review and we just can't get rid of it. So
yeah, we tried. Can I say it made a point? I mean, the bad review is not totally bad.
Right.
Also.
Right. But reviews and likes really do make a difference in who is able to find our show. So we'll hope that you'll give us some feedback. And along those lines, please take the Bike Talk listener survey if you haven't already. It's still up at biketalk.org, and it only takes a couple of minutes to do so. And it really lets us learn a little bit more about you. And we will, of course, discuss the results in an upcoming episode.
Cool. Looking forward to that. And you want to read a listener email?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. This one's from Gino in Vermont. Hi, Bike Talk. I love your radio show and podcast. Keep it coming. I promise to write you a great review on Apple Podcasts.
Bada bing, bada boom.
On your website, please correct the location of my community radio station, WOOL-FM. It's located in Bellow Falls, Vermont, not Montpelier.
Great.
Your biketalk.org website can use a few other improvements, probably your social media too. I'm not an expert, but your website is not well organized. It's more like a blog. Other than that, you're great. And yes, I took your survey. Best, Gino.
Well, thanks, Gino. And I couldn't agree more. I'm not sure if you're an expert, but Nick and I are certainly not experts at social media. So we will work on that.
Yeah. How about some news? You want to hear Charlie's news?
Charlie's news. Yeah.
It's Charlie here with the week's news. From Streets Blog Mass, third-party data has been compiled into a Boston City report that shows that new bike lanes have increased bike trips and decreased car traffic. On Boylston Street, for instance, there was an 84% increase in bike users and as much as a 14% decrease in cars at one counting checkpoint. Curiously, a link for this report was removed from the city's bike project's website, and they did not respond to Streets Blog's questions on the matter. So bike lanes work, but according to Streets Blog NYC, in Astoria, Queens, a judge ruled to rip up a partially installed bike lane. A group of businesses sued in the middle of construction of the lane, confusingly arguing that the street design would be unsafe for cyclists and pedestrians. The DOT generally has discretion on road design over the general public, which is what judges usually cite, including when ripping up bike lanes, but here Judge Sherry Buggs ruled against that precedent and against data proving the safety of protected bike lanes. From the New York Times, buses in Iowa City have been free since August 2023, and the results have been great. Ridership is up 18% since the pandemic, and emissions have dropped by 788 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year, the equivalent of removing 167 cars from the roads. On-time arrivals are up by 13%, and the extension of the program after 2 pilot years only required a 1% increase in utility taxes and a $1 increase in most public parking rates. That's a win-win if you ask Bike Talk. From Streets Blog USA, it turns out all that FSA or HSA money you've got left over can be put towards a bike. Several bike manufacturers have bikes that are available on special FSA, HSA websites, and you can use that pre-tax money to buy them. You'll need a letter of medical necessity, but those aren't difficult to obtain, as biking has been proven to help with a variety of commonplace modern-day ailments and shortcomings related to heart health, obesity, mental health, the list goes on. So get yourself a bike.
Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike.
So in other news, Nick, I was reading in the local West Hollywood paper that the city of West Hollywood, where I live, is going to fix its sidewalks so that the robots can use the sidewalks. We don't worry about fixing the sidewalks for the people, but for the robots, we will fix the sidewalks. And that makes me think of our guest who runs the channel Oh, the Urbanity, Patrick Murphy from Montreal, Canada. Patrick, welcome to Bike Talk.
Thanks for having me.
Hey.
Did you say A, Nick?
Oh, so Patrick, how's the weather up there?
It's minus 15 to minus 20 Celsius, which I think is about 0 Fahrenheit. We're supposed to get another snow dump tomorrow. This is a little colder and snowier than normal, but not wildly abnormal.
Well, more importantly, Patrick, how's the riding?
Well, it all depends on, honestly, it depends on the route and the borough in the city, because in Montreal, the snow clearing is handled by the boroughs, and some are better than others, and some routes are better than others. But basically, if you're taking one of the express bike corridors, which are kind of the highest quality routes in a borough that is attentive to this stuff, it's almost always quite good. There's a handful of days each year where it can be hard to ride. So a few years ago, when I first really started getting into winter cycling, I did a challenge of wanting to bike every single day in the winter. Didn't have to be long, but I wanted to do something every day. And I really encountered maybe half a dozen days where it was actually substantially difficult, not worth it. So it happens, but with good clearing and maintenance, you can ride most of the winter for sure.
Yeah, so really only 1 week out of the winter is it not doable, and the rest of the time you can. I love that.
Yeah, it also depends to some extent on the routes though. So like if you're dealing with some painted bike lanes, those can kind of disappear in the winter because it's just harder to clear them. But if you can use the good routes to get, to work, to daycare, wherever you're going, you're going to be good for 95% of the winter.
And how are they cleaned?
They have snowplows. So it depends on the size of the bike lanes. So some of the two-way bike lanes, which are a little wider, they have pickup trucks with plows on the front. And for some of the one-way bike lanes on each side of the street, they have basically similar to sidewalk plows, which are a little narrower.
And you also have sidewalk plows.
Yep, we have sidewalk plows. Montreal is quite good at Yeah, a lot of cities, more so in the US, but some in Canada, don't clear the sidewalks. They leave it up to homeowners, basically, which kind of blows my mind, honestly. It's just,
Yeah.
imagine if we did that for roads. Like, okay, after a snowfall, everybody has to get out and plow or shovel the road in front of their house. It just
Yeah.
doesn't work. When you ask people from cities that don't do it, and if they're, happy with the status quo, they'll basically say that it costs too much to do the sidewalks as well, which is basically saying they're prioritizing cars over pedestrians because as a grad student at the time, able-bodied, all this stuff, I handled it, better than average. And it's not like sidewalks don't get cleared at all. Like there are people who put in effort to shovel it. It's just inconsistent. You might have some older people who aren't able to shovel. You'll have people on vacation, so it can be very hit or miss the quality. Basically, if you're fit, all that stuff, you can handle it better. If you're, pushing a stroller as I am now, if you have disability, if you have other physical issues, then not plowing the sidewalks and leaving it up to homeowners really can leave you isolated for a substantial portion of the year, depending on your luck.
Right. And we know that the weakest link of the chain is what keeps people from doing stuff. So if part of the sidewalk is not cleared, then people who are pushing a stroller or in a wheelchair can't use the sidewalk at all then.
Exactly. If 80% of the people do a good job, but 20% don't, you're still out of luck,
Right.
depending on your abilities and situation.
Do they clear the sidewalks for the robots or for the people?
We don't have delivery robots. I've heard about this in the news, but I've never seen those here in Montreal or any other place in Canada.
Just wait. I think that they will be there soon because they are all over my neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I don't think those will catch on. Well, it's really impressive that you plow your sidewalks and your bike lanes in Montreal. It's really living up to, what is it, the best bike city in North America?
Definitely among the bigger cities. If you want to, quibble with some smaller cities like Davis, California, or Victoria, BC, those can put up a good showing. But among the bigger cities, for sure, it's probably Montreal.
All right. And your channel, can you tell us about that real quick?
Yeah, run a channel called Oh the Urbanity, which talks a lot about cycling in Montreal, also some other topics like housing affordability and public transit, but cycling is the primary topic or a major topic.
All right.
Love
Well,
that.
welcome to Bike Talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Patrick Murphy, Oh the Urbanity in Montreal.
Thanks, Patrick.
Montreal, plowing the sidewalks, plowing the bike lanes. I went to Montreal. It's like a 4.5 hour drive from where I live in Massachusetts. And we did a interview with someone from the bike coalition there,
I remember. Yeah.
Martin
Episode.
Hamill. That was before we numbered the episodes. It was called Civil Obedience, Phantom Bikes, White Shoes, and Car-Free Streets in Canada was the title. So if you can
It's a
search
great
that.
title.
So check that out. Also, there's a cool thing I found that on Blue Sky, which is the social media I use for Bike Talk. On Blue Sky, if you or probably anywhere, type in hashtag tree by bike, you see a ton of posts about people getting their Christmas tree on a cargo bike or other bike.
Yeah. One I saw, the guy just has it strapped to his back.
Yeah. Yeah. There's endless scrolling
Yeah.
about that. Hashtag tree by bike.
Just in time for Christmas, Trump gave a big present to the automobile industry and the oil companies by rolling back the CAFE emission standards. So thanks, Donald, for that.
Yeah, that was going to make cars more fuel efficient. So we don't have to worry about that. And we're heading into a story by the New York Times. The New York Times ran a scary story on e-bikes called The Danger of E-Bikes, just as New York City's having a wave of e-bikelash
Right.
and they're criminalizing people who ride bikes.
Before we play the interview, because it's really wonderful, I don't know if you noticed, but they made a point of saying that the author of the article they didn't use the word avid bike rider. They said lifelong cyclist.
Right.
So I think they felt like they had to preface that.
Well, we know avid bicyclist is usually, but I don't support bike lanes. But I guess lifelong cyclist is a warning sign.
Right.
So we're here today to talk about this New York Times article about e-bikes, the shocking crash that led one county to
reckon with the danger of e-bikes.
That was Sophia Lebowitz, writer for Streetblog NYC. We also have Carl Mahaney, director of Streetopia Upper West Side, and with Open Plans, right, Carl?
Correct.
And we have Warren Wells, policy and advocacy director of the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. And that's good because the main story in the New York Times article takes place in Marin County. And we also have Miser, who's a organizer on the subreddit MicromobilityNYC.
Yeah.
And Miser, you're like good friends with Mamdani, right?
Well, I wouldn't say good friends, but yeah, he's my assemblyman. So we've been working together for a while on things, as he has with almost everybody doing any sort of real organizing in the city. He's a very busy man. But yeah, we're very, very excited he's going to be taking over shortly. Can't wait.
All right. Well, let me not get distracted. I'm like a little bit vicariously starstruck here by that fact. But here's a New York Times article. We've been talking about bikelash. And, you know, it's a well-researched article. There's a lot of people that we talk to on Bike Talk referenced in it. But it's told through the lens of a brain injury survivor of a teenager who was severely injured in an e-bike accident. And then it's got stories about groups of teens on e-bikes occupying the street and very troubling statistics. And they talk to everybody and they give the arguments for e-bikes, you know, like how much emissions they displace from cars, even more than electric vehicles. And, you know, it had a quote from somebody at CalBike saying, the problem is heavy cars and trucks, and you're worried about somebody doing wheelies. But in light of the whole story that this article is telling, the tone of that comment actually seemed kind of wrong. And so I just wanted to talk about the article. I know Warren, Marin County Bike Coalition Policy and Advocacy Director, you had some strong things to say about it on Blue Sky. You want to start with that?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me and good to be part of this. This is a complex issue. I want to acknowledge that I think that the article touches on something that we at the Bike Coalition view as a real problem, namely the proliferation of, you know, what we and other people in the advocacy community are calling e-motos, namely bikes that are sold, marketed by the manufacturers as Class 2 throttle bikes, which should have a maximum speed of 20 miles an hour, and it should have a motor that maxes out at 750 watts, but in reality are capable of much higher speeds under throttle power and have a much higher motor power than that 750 watts. I've been on the pathway in Mill Valley and had a kid go by me throttling at 30 plus miles an hour. And that's not what the legislature intended when they allowed these bikes. That all set aside, we think that's a problem. I think this article really misses on some of the public health front, and this has been something that I have been critical of our public health department here in Marin, of kind of using statistics that don't bear any relation to reality, or at least are not in the proper context. One thing that jumped out at me that was my initial post was one of the public health officials saying that for e-bike injury crashes, the fatality rate was 11%. A candid reader would see that and say, okay, so 1 out of every 9 people injured in an e-bike crash dies. And I think that's just clearly not true. Marin County has an e-bike crash database. To their credit, they're cataloging e-bike and e-moto because they don't distinguish between the two crashes over the past few years. There are 175 crash or 170 crashes in there. If there were an 11% fatality rate, we'd have 19 dead cyclists on e-bikes, and that actually there's been 1. That's off by a factor of about 20, and it could be more. Those figures jumped out to me as being kind of wildly at odds with reality.
If I could jump in here, the obvious reason that figure is so wrong is that they're looking at the number of people died relative to the number of people that went to the hospital, I'm sure, when in reality, with most bike collisions or bike accidents, including e-bikes, they're not reported, the vast majority. So if you're just looking at the paper trail of things serious enough that they result in a medical incident that city service has to come take care of, yeah, there's probably going to be some disproportionately high number of very serious cases. But those cases in general are a very, very tiny percentage of, people that have any incident at all. So the data is totally, totally wrong.
That's a great point. Like there is this huge universe of data or crashes where someone like tips over on an e-bike and then gets back up that's not reported. And even if someone like gets doored, if the kid gets doored, and they're not super hurt, they just get back on the bike, and that there is no, cataloging of that. And so, that's 11% figure. There's no context given. So I, as a reader, I don't know. All I can do is assume that is, perhaps 11% of e-bike crashes that resulted in an ambulance ride or an emergency room visit. I don't know, but it's not e-bike injury crashes. That's clearly wrong.
So that's one statistic. That's one thing in the article. Do you think the article is trying to scare us? It kind of seems like that from the title. Sophia.
Yeah, so, I found this article really interesting considering I actually wrote something about specifically e-motos like pretty recently. Just very different, not looking at any specific crash, but really just trying to explain, what are these e-motos? Most of the things in New York City that people are complaining about end up actually being these e-motos, which are already illegal. You're already not allowed to sell them, not allowed to ride them on the street. And it was more in the context of saying, maybe we don't need all of these new regulations. We just need to enforce the regulations we already have. But I felt sort of that in regards to this difference, the writer seemed to sort of give up on differentiating between the two, sort of midway through the article. You saw at the beginning, he did make a point to explain the difference and then just sort of continue to use the term e-bike. And I know it can be like difficult when writing. I find that difficult because it's colloquially like it's an e-bike, but you have to really be careful because it just lets people continue to misuse the term and then it results in more people buying them thinking they're bikes. It really seems to me like it was an article to scare parents out of buying these things for their kids, which I think it was probably successful on that front, which maybe isn't such a terrible thing. I know when talking to people for bikes, talking about a more national view, because I focus on New York City, that is a big problem that kids are getting these e-motos. I think we can all agree that like they probably shouldn't be riding on these extremely fast non-bike kind of motorcycle devices. But yeah, there's just a lot of context missing from the article that some people could read it and just start to feel very negatively towards bikes in general, which I just think, I don't know if it's an unintended consequence or an intended consequence, but I think it's a consequence nonetheless.
Yeah. To that point, I feel like it's another sort of contribution to this this kind of moral panic. Like we saw it 200 years ago with the bicycle in New York City. There's some great research on this, and there's always been a hysteria when something new comes on the scene, and particularly around bicycles. I don't know what it is, but people lose their minds over bicycles, always have. And add a motor to that, and it supercharges that fear of this new thing. So I think this piece was very, like you said, Nick, very well researched, beautifully told. The photographs were stunning. It was one of these magazine style pieces that sort of contribute, again, intentionally or not, I don't know, to this sort of like sense that there is something to be concerned about, that we should be worried about e-bikes, full stop, where that nuance of e-motos versus e-bikes is completely lost on, the vast majority of folks. This just contributes to that larger sense of panic. It's pointed out in the article, and we all know this, everybody on this call knows this. These are also anecdotes. That same emergency room doctor could have chosen, his line in the sand could have been automobile crashes and teenagers driving cars and wrapping them around telephone poles and trees. But he chose, or they found a doctor who chose this as their line in the sand so they can sort of like continue this narrative.
I think that's
and we.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say in regards to that moral panic thing, like it's important to note that even the e-motos, it's a quality of life issue, pretty much. Like we aren't seeing this crazy rise in deaths and injuries from these e-motos compared to what we see with car drivers, and the things that happen when people are in cars. I thought something that stood out to me when I was reading was that he mentions the town of Key Biscayne in Florida and how they banned e-bikes outright after one single death. That's Miami-Dade County. In 2025 so far, there have been 235 total traffic violence fatalities in Miami-Dade County. And like, you don't see anyone advocating that we should ban cars. It's like a different thing in people's minds, and I'm not really sure why.
Carl, I think, and Sophia, I'm here in Marin. This is where we work. Obviously, every death of anybody on our roads, but for my job, anybody on a bike is critically important. And we've spent now the last 2 years focusing so much on e-bike safety, which again is important. And we've passed a bill in the legislature that it was initially supposed to be a statewide bill and was scaled down to a Marin County specific 4-year pilot to limit class 2 bikes to people 16 or older. And then in April of this year, there was a horrific car crash involving 5 teen girls, 3 of whom were killed, and another was grievously injured. And it's like, how many people have been killed on e-bikes in this time? Like how many teens have been killed in e-bike crashes? Again, I don't want to minimize the horrible injury that the subject of this piece experienced, but it's been 0. And if I were a public health officer concerned about kids' safety and transportation, I would at least say, here are our strategies for addressing injuries in automobiles, and we just have heard literally nothing on that latter front, which is a frustration of mine.
Miser, any more thoughts on that article? And then next I want to ask what we do need to do about, if any, there's the legislation that Warren just mentioned, but what we can do.
I'll combine both of those, actually. And the thing that I think is important to remember about the article and the panic about e-bikes and why Sophia mentioned cars and stuff like that is that both cars and bikes are tools for doing the same thing, which is getting around. And obviously, with any sort of transportation, any human body in motion, there's the potential for injuries and harm. However, the rate of injury and the severity of injury between these two modes are, as we all know, wildly different, right? So anything you can do as a legislature, as a lawmaker, to get people out of their cars and onto e-bikes or bikes makes your city safer and makes the people that you represent safer and reduces injuries. So the real risk of these types of articles that further this narrative and polarize people that don't really understand the benefits of e-bikes against them, the real risk of that is that you're setting up oftentimes another roadblock for getting people to make that switch, which makes things safer and better. Any frustration, any additional friction at this point that keeps people from doing that actually makes your city more dangerous, which is, if you take things like this article and things legislators say at face value, it's the opposite of what they want to do. So it's very important to remember the real goal is make it as easy as possible for people to get on e-bikes.
I feel like the article actually did make that point. Somebody made that point to the writer that, if you're getting people out of cars, you're making the overall environment safer.
Yeah, it does seem to get lost sometimes. Occasionally when you make, a comparison to cars, people are like, why are you even talking about cars? We're talking about, e-bikes and how dangerous they are. And it's like, well, you have to talk about cars because they're in comparison. They're tools for doing the same task, and you should be incentivizing people to use the obviously far, far safer tool and better tool for the environment, all the other reasons bikes are better.
Yeah, a lot of the article was about kids joyriding. Right. I mean, I guess it said they get to school, but I think you all in this conversation are bike advocates. I think it's fair to say. I mean, I don't know if you all identify that way, but you're not like the fossil fuel industry or the pharmaceutical industry when they're coming up with rules to regulate themselves. You actually have ideas about regulating e-bikes, right? Warren, you just talked about legislation, and I thought we could go around and talk about ideas. Do you think, there's a lot of infrastructure that we need, maybe different paths for different speeds? What do people think we need?
My solution is just that you shouldn't be able to ride anything that goes faster than 20 miles an hour. Just hard cap everything. And here's the step that I think is the real kicker. That includes cars. Let's put a speed governor on everything that moves in the city, right? I don't think you should be able to drive your car faster than 20 miles an hour, your box truck, or your e-bike. Put speed governors on all of them in the city. And you can do that with, GPS geotagging. It's not that hard problem, really.
Yeah, I'm on record as saying that the three-class system that People for Bikes got passed around the country with their model legislation in, I guess, 2013, 2014, got it wrong. I catch some flack online when I say this because people like their Class 3 e-bikes or their long commutes. Like, I get it. We live in the world where we do. And, a Class 3 e-bike is really, going 28 miles an hour really might be replacing a car commute. But also, I mean, I'm kind of with Miser here. Like, I think 18, 20 miles an hour is plenty. Even in the bike community, I feel like there's a bit of a moral panic around throttle. People are like, oh, anything with a throttle is a motorcycle. It's like, I don't know, like imagine a throttle bike that had a max speed of 8 miles an hour. Like, are you scared of that? Like, it's not the throttle, it's the top
Right.
speed. I would have been happy if we had just picked up the EU regulations from the start. It would have been the same bikes everywhere. That caps out at 15.5 miles an hour, which I think is too slow for some people. If we had made that 18 or 20, that would have been fine for me. And actually, that recommendation, you will see there's a researcher who's quoted in the piece, Sasha Weinstein-Agarwal, or Agarwal-Weinstein, who at San Jose State University has a really actually great research piece about e-bike safety. It's kind of like, I would say it's the leading edge of what we know that I got to read a preview of. That's kind of one of her recommendations, which I largely agree with. But again, I feel like the genie is a bit out of the bottle at this point. What I would love to see is a more serious crackdown, to Sophia's point, on the regulations that we already have. There are these manufacturers who are selling devices that they know to be out of compliance with state law. And I do not understand why, like, to my knowledge, like, no attorneys general have filed a cease and desist order against these companies who are misleading consumers and selling devices that I believe are dangerous and are clearly illegal. I mean, there would have been room for this article to have been about this scandal, which is all these manufacturers selling things labeled as e-bikes and are hurting kids. The title of the piece is absolutely at odds with that, saying, here's an e-bike crash. Right. It actually wasn't on an e-bike. And that drives me crazy.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off of that because I completely agree. I was going to use the same term that the genie is out of the bottle. I ride a regular bike all over the city, and I just notice people all day, every day on illegal class 2, and I'm doing air quotes, e-moto e-bikes. And I think it's a consumer issue. People, and I think this is a direct quote from the article, that people don't follow rules that they don't understand. And the 3-class system we have now is extremely confusing for people, especially in New York City, where we, for some reason, have a completely different 3-class system than the rest of the country. Now we have a council member that wants to ban the New York City version of Class 3 e-bikes. It's unclear if that would ban the national version of Class 3 e-bikes. And then the problem of e-motos, those are classified as Class 2 fakely, but those are classified as Class 2 because those have throttle. So the whole thing is a mess. There are clear companies that are selling these illegal vehicles to people and blatantly misrepresenting them and marketing them as bikes when they're not. And I think that would be a great place to start. I also think in New York City, we have a big delivery industry, and a lot of people see e-bikes linked to that because by and large, delivery workers use e-bikes or mopeds to make their deliveries. And if we have some more regulation on the app industry where they could use, similar to what Miser was talking about, some sort of GPS technology to kind of cap speeds of their workers and enforce some sort of speed limit for commercial use, then I think that would make a big difference, because at least then people in the city would not be able to scapegoat these workers anymore as causing this big problem. They're a group that I think gets blamed for a lot of this in the city, and I don't think that's right, but that is what happens. But yeah, I think just stop selling these vehicles.
I want to hear from Carl, who I'm sure has a lot on this, but I also wanted to say that there's a bill, right, about food delivery workers on bikes.
Yes. Yeah. So this bill isn't directly related to e-bikes, but it would stop the app companies from being able to deactivate or essentially fire workers without cause, which a lot of workers testify to, saying that they feel they have to rush around and they feel they have to accept every order and move really fast because they are unsure of why they get disciplined. So they'll be either locked out of the app for a certain amount of days per week because of scheduling, and that has to do with our minimum pay standard. But then they'll also get deactivated and get told that there was fraud in their account. Uber has testified that they will classify something as fraud when the driver or the bike rider takes like a long time to deliver something. So they feel they have to rush. And advocates say that if this bill was passed where the app companies would have to go through a dedicated process if they want to fire or deactivate someone with a dedicated appeals process, that would fix at least part of that problem.
There's a bill for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, Carl, what would you do?
I've been thinking a lot. I agree with everything everyone just said. The regulatory landscape just needs to be cleaned up and just made very clear to consumers. But I've been thinking a lot about actually an article, I think, from earlier this week, Sophia, of yours about, I think, an MIT study.
Oh, yeah.
About the counting of bikes in New York City, micromobility devices altogether, but particularly bikes on bike lanes, and how DOT is sort of undercounting those. But the majority of bicycles now are electric, are e-bikes. And only 25% of those, at least counted by this researcher, were being used for commercial purposes based on their methodology. So I think that signals, we know that there's a huge delivery industry that's relying on these devices, but if that's only 25% of what we're counting, that means that are a lot of people from all walks of life who are using these devices to get around. And that, I've been thinking a lot about what that means for my advocacy and my organizing and the kinds of infrastructure we need to accommodate that. We sort of aspire to an Amsterdam or a Copenhagen, but our solutions might not look exactly like that, because the world that we're living in is that we don't have folks moving around on Dutch bikes, at 7 miles an hour. We have people moving a little bit faster. If we could get some regulation in there that sets a reasonable cap to that, 15, 18, 20, whatever it is, and has some teeth to it so we can keep these illegal devices off the road, then we can start to think about what that infrastructure looks like to accommodate sort of everything from a child on a pedal bike to a delivery worker to somebody on a city bike getting to work.
I'm sure we could all say more, but I think we covered a lot. Does anybody have anything burning that they want to say?
No, this was a great conversation. It was really cool to hear from you, Warren, especially just get the Marin County perspective.
Ground zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Anybody going to make the Times do a follow-up?
I don't know. Maybe they need an op-ed from Warren.
I've never submitted one for the Times. I've submitted a lot for the Marin Independent Journal, but
letter to the editor, Warren.
I'm sure Streets Blog would run it if the Times won't. So
cool. I've
send me an email.
A bunch of stuff for like Streets Blog SF.
Yeah.
So
all right,
it's probably worth doing. Well, thanks for having us on. Really appreciate it. Nice to meet you guys. I've enjoyed your work before. I don't get out to New York that much, but I always really enjoy it when I do.
All right.
Look us up.
Well, you don't have to be in New York to read Streets Blog NYC.
No, I know. But I was for everybody's.
Getting out to New York, you using that helmet, Nick?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not there a lot, but yeah, Miser, thanks for that. It's a DOT bike helmet.
Oh, I love the DOT helmet.
Yeah. It's actually a great helmet. They didn't cheap out. They cheap out on bike lanes, but the bike helmets, top notch.
I got some DOT lights recently. They were giving them out if you took like a survey, and they already died in like a week. So
yeah. I have some of the silicone ones.
They
have like a watch battery in them.
Yeah, I know. I got to change the battery, but
All right, well, we could talk more about the DOT
another time.
Yeah, I'm sure you could all do one on the DOT. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. Bye. Good weekend, everyone.
So that was good.
Yeah.
What'd you think? Do you think the article was biased?
Well, when we were talking before we started recording, you used the word hit piece, and I asked you to take that out and change it to scary article. But after hearing it again and after seeing the article again, I think maybe you're right. It really was a little bit of a hit piece with that opening story about this, young woman, young girl who is really injured badly by an e-bike crash. And it just sets up a scary situation.
Yeah. And just look at the title, The Danger of E-Bikes.
Right.
We had one of the panelists, Sophia Lebowitz, on before. She wrote the article in Streets Blog NYC called The Problem with E-Bikes, the Super Fast Illegal Ones. And that's in episode 2543 bikelash. And, everybody in the panel agreed that the problem is not e-bikes. The problem is illegal e-bikes, which are already illegal. And so the article should have been called The Danger of Illegal E-Bikes.
Right. Or e-motos. I mean, isn't that a better term?
I guess.
And then those people have to register the bike. They have to get a license. They have to be 16 years old. Any number of different regulations would keep the young woman in that article hopefully safe. But the article could have easily started with a young woman getting hit by a car,
right,
speeding in their neighborhood.
And Carl said that doctor in the story, the heroic doctor who, well, yeah, I mean, he is a heroic doctor, but being a doctor is heroic, but who he drew the line at e-bikes. That was his line. And why couldn't he draw that line at cars? Why is it e-bikes?
Right. Well, my answer to that can only be that the powers that be just believe cars are a necessary evil and that bikes and e-bikes and e-motos are a toy still. And they don't see bikes as a legitimate form of transportation.
And I think that's why Miser pointed out that they do the same thing. That has to be pointed out. One replaces the other.
Right.
I mean, e-bikes replace cars.
I mean, if you can take a Christmas tree home on a bike, what do you need a car for?
Right. Another thing Miser said was that, sure, cap e-bikes at 20 miles per hour, but then so should box trucks be capped at 20 miles per hour and other cars. It's the top speed that we need to cap.
And if we can geofence e-bikes on city streets, we can geofence cars on city streets so that they can still go fast on highways or arterial roads, but on a neighborhood street, they're capped at 20, 25 miles an hour.
Yeah, what's the counter argument to that?
They paid $50,000. That's the average price of a new car, and they want to go faster than 25 miles an hour. That's the counter argument.
It would be something like that, something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
All right. Let's change the subject.
I was going to say, let's change the subject because a good friend of mine rode his bike all around Japan. And we've been talking a little bit about the different kinds of ways people can tour on bikes. And this guy had a really amazing tour of Japan.
We've been talking on the show a lot lately about how you might go on a tour, whether it's in Slovenia and it's a guided tour, or whether you're on your own in a foreign city, either in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere, how you might see that city by bicycle. Today, I'm riding with my friend Aaron Lipstadt, who has been on the show before. He's a bicycle collector and has some really beautiful handmade bikes. But he just got back from a tour of Japan. Aaron, welcome back to Bike Talk.
Thanks, Taylor.
Tell me a little bit about how you did this. You said this was a self-guided tour. What does that mean? How did it work? Why'd you pick Japan? And go.
Well, I'd had this dream for probably 10 years of riding in Japan. And I had this, I don't know, I probably saw a picture somewhere of some beautiful bamboo-lined forest with a narrow, winding road and going to a onsen, a hot spring at the end of the day. And I actually had my friend Bill and I were going to do this in 2019. And he, some family event came up, he couldn't do it, and he promised me that we would do it the next year. Of course, the next year was 2020, and there was nobody going anywhere. But, I kept at it, and we finally went this year. So what I started with was, what kind of riding do I want to do? That's the first thing.
Right.
I didn't want to be in the city. I mean, I could do that by myself, but I wanted to see a part of Japan that I hadn't been to, and that would be challenging for riding and interesting as countryside. And like I said, I had this vision of these roads. First, I did some research on companies that were offering some kind of tours of Japan, bike tours. And I found this company called Bike Rindo Japan. Rindo, R-I-N-D-O, is the name for roads that are either have no car traffic or very little. They're, kind of isolated roads. And that was kind of their specialty. And Now, this company also does tours all over Japan, but their base is in Kiryu, which is in what's called the Nitto Alps. That's an area a couple hours outside of Tokyo, and there's some mountains, I'd say. The peaks were sort of 5,000 to 6,000 feet high, but also foothills around them and valleys, of course. So this seemed like the company seemed to have a lot of expertise in leading bike rides, and they knew this area. So that was my first step, was kind of picking what I wanted to do. And I knew I didn't want to be in a group of a dozen people, where you ride 20 or 25 miles and then you go visit an indigo dye place. I didn't want to do one of those sort of, I don't know what they call them, like cultural back road style, back road's a bike company.
Or even just a group tour. It sounds like you wanted to do it on your own.
Yeah, I didn't want to be led around. And so what they were immediately willing to go along with me on was the idea that I would ride either with Bill or by myself. And their job basically was they facilitated the tour, and it was semi-supported in that I had luggage. I left it in my hotel every morning. Somehow it got to the next hotel the next day. So I didn't have to carry anything more than, a toolkit, some spare tubes, and my water bottle.
Right. And you said like a rain jacket and a few other things like that, maybe a camera and stuff.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be colder than it was. I mean, it was in October and we were at altitude, so I thought it was going to be colder. But like we said, there's no more normal in terms of weather. It was pretty warm. I could ride in a short sleeve jersey every day, but I had, in case it rained, in case it got cold, I had that stuff. But that's all I carried with me. And what was great was basically we worked out how long the trip is going to be, what kind of places, and again, depending on your budget, they will book you into a cheaper place, a mid-range place, a high-end place. That's all can be worked out. So we picked out an itinerary, and it was great when we first got there. Now, my friend Bill had rented a bike, so they set him up. They picked us up at the train station in Nito.
But you brought your own bike, you said.
Bill rented a bike, and I brought my bike. I've got a Merlin titanium frame that has S&S couplers. So the bike comes apart. It fits in a suitcase, which is basically the size of a wheel. It's 26 by 26 by 6. So it's no problem getting on an airplane. It's no problem putting it on a train. So I brought my bike. They picked us up at the train station. I built my bike. They set Bill up on his rental bike. And we started riding the first day. We did I did about 40 miles. But I got to say, my first day, within a half an hour, I rode out of town, and I was on this beautiful forest road, completely quiet, as picturesque as you could imagine. And I'm not embarrassed to say that tears came to my eyes. It was like my dream for so many years was like coming true. And what they would do is they gave us a link to rides, and they rate them 1, 2, 3, 4 on difficulty. Right. So you pick the kind of level you want. And, if it's raining or if it's overcast and you say, I only want to ride 30 miles today, then you can do that. If you're saying, I feel good, I want to climb a mountain.
So they weren't with you on the ride. They just sent you the itinerary for the different routes. And each day you woke up and chose what you wanted to do that day. And the different routes let you off at the hotel where you were spending the night that night. And they brought your luggage from the previous place to the place where you're going to sleep that night. And they didn't do any restaurants or any of that kind of stuff. They just sort of helped you do your own tour. Is that kind of right?
Yeah, pretty much. They were always a text away. So generally the night before or the morning of, we could just get up, have breakfast, and look at the weather and say, I feel like doing this today. And we would text them and say, Bill's doing, ride XJ2, and I'm going to do ride XJ4. We would share a location with them so they could track us. And if they thought we were off track or having difficulty, they would call us or send a text and say, are you okay? Do you need help?
Wow.
And in fact, there was one day where we got a little bit over our heads and it got dark and I missed a turn. And I was climbing, got to a ridge, went the wrong way, and I was effectively in a valley parallel to where I should have been.
Oh, wow. So you had to go over something.
And it's dark, and I've got, lights, but not lights to light up the road. And they literally, my contact called me up and said, Aaron, stay where you are. I see where you are. We're going to come and get you and take you to the hotel.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it was really, it was basically nice to know that someone was there if you needed them. But if you didn't, you were on your own. And generally, in the route description, I have some bone to pick about some of the route description, which are not quite as accurate as they might be. But generally, it'd say, hey, if you want to stop, here's a great soba noodle place you can stop, or here's a great, sushi place. If you want to stop for lunch, they would pick that out. They would point out, you might want to go to the shrine that's on your route, or you might just want to climb 5,000 feet. And,
right. And you said your buddy Bill rode an e-bike.
Yeah, they will give you either regular road bikes or e-bikes. He had an e-bike, which I think once he figured it out, he was pretty happy with. It was, it helped him climb, and but it was a good experience because, first of all, it was my dream come true,
right.
And they provided really as much support as I wanted and as little support as I wanted.
Right.
So it was a great way to do it. They knew the terrain. They knew after a day or two, they kind of knew what I was interested in.
Right.
Even before we went, I said, this is the kind of riding I want to do. This is how much I want to ride per day. But there was always latitude. You weren't stuck to any one road or one route.
Yeah, I think that's what's scary for me is this idea that I would be in a foreign place and have no idea where to ride and end up riding on a busy road when a mile away is a beautiful country road that I just didn't know about. But that's where the guide comes in handy.
Yeah, it was really great because they would. I'm amazed at how the depth of their knowledge, because I would go on these roads that were so, like, how did anybody find this road? It's kind of like, I was thinking one day, and I ride Los Angeles all the time, and there's always roads where you ride the same route over and over, and you say, what's up there?
Right.
You look at someone and you say, what happens if I go there? And you don't do it. And these roads were like someone had done that.
Right.
Someone said, oh, if you go up here, you go past this beautiful waterfall, or you go past this beautiful rice field, and it was great to feel like there was someone like looking over your shoulder who could say, hey, here's a nice place to go.
And how many days was the trip for you?
I was on the road 8 days.
8 days.
And rode every day.
Wow, that just sounds great. Well, thanks for sharing that, because we really are sort of expanding this idea of how bike tourism and bike touring can work. And as I said before, my brother and his wife just got back from Slovenia with a guided trip with like 10 people. I like this idea of being sort of told where are great rides, but then you do it on your own. So this is different for us.
Yeah, and also, I had ridden a little bit in Slovenia, but also Croatia and Italy 2 years ago with Bill, my same friend, and it was exact opposite. We just sort of looked on a map and looked good, and sometimes literally I'd make a phone call in the morning and book an Airbnb for that night because, it's European languages. I know enough to get by, but Japan, visually you couldn't sort of even know what was a hotel and what was a restaurant.
Right. It's all Greek to me.
Yeah. So to have someone, to have the knowledge that you've got a hotel booked and a mineral bath waiting for you when you got off the bike was pretty great.
Sure is. Tell me one more time the name of the tour company.
It's called Bike Rindo Japan.
Bike Rindo Japan.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, thanks a lot. It sounds like a great trip, and the pictures that you sent were really beautiful. So I'm really glad you got to do it finally.
Yeah, thanks. Me too. Thanks a lot.
There's a lot of interesting culture in Japan, and I didn't know about the baths.
Yeah, I love the idea of riding all day and then taking a bath.
Yeah. I'm going to go take a shower.
Okay. Maybe that's TMI.
Oh, is that too? Oh, I guess I'm at that age where that's TMI.
Yeah.
Do they take them in public?
Well, I think they have both. I think they have public baths and private baths. And he was staying at some hotels where you had a private bath, and sometimes you would go use the public bath in part of the hotel also. So it sounded really wonderful.
All right. So that's the show.
Yeah,
Good
I think
show.
so. We want to thank our guests.
Carl Mahaney, Sophia Lebowitz, Warren Wells, and Miser.
Right. And we want to thank Patrick Murphy of the Urbanity and Aaron Lipstadt of riding his bike around Japan.
Great.
And of course, we always want to thank our regulars, Julie Richard, Josh Hagland, Lindsay Sturman, Stacey Randecker, Amy Ziering, Charlie Lighthizer, and Kevin Burton.
All right. Do you have a quote?
I do. Going back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, that a bicycle is a tool for transportation, for health. I found this one quote that I really like. Cycling, it's cheaper than therapy.
I think I think we've used that, but yeah.
Oh, have we?
But is it working for you?
It does for me.
Cool. Yeah, I can see that you're getting better.
Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor.
Ride safe.
My bike is everything to me. My bike is my gym, my church, and my wheelchair. My bike is everything that I believe in, everything that's going on at the biosphere. It's science, it's technology, it's the future, engineering, metallurgy, you name it, it's right there on my bike. My bike is the most important, valuable thing that I have.
This episode of Bike Talk is sponsored by the law offices of Pocras and De Los Reyes, with offices in Los Angeles and Bakersfield and serving all of Southern California.
Bike Talk is a project of CRSP and the Los Angeles Eco-Village Institute. And that was Bike Talk. If you have a story, a tip, or a topic, head over to biketalk.org and send us a message. Talk again next week.
Put your feet on the pedals and ride it all around, ride it all around. Oh, get that car out of my way. I wanna ride my bike today. It keeps me fit, gets me there. I won't go stinking up the air. Leave behind the daily grind. Let your mind unwind. Live its life, pretend to life. Better get yourself a bike. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, put your feet on the pedal, and ride it all around, ride it all around. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, put your feet on the pedal, and ride it all around, ride it all around. Get that car out of my way, I wanna ride my bike today. It keeps me fit, gets me there, I won't go stinking up the air. Leave behind the daily grind, let your mind unwind. Live its life, pretend to life, better get yourself a bike.
Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike. Oh, got yourself a bike.